midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. in London and most of Europe, 8:30, 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia, 11:30, I think I've got that right. Please tell me if I don't have it right. 11:30 in New Zealand, and it's Facebook Live. Hello, hello. And I love recognizing people coming in from all over the world. It really excites us to know that we're reaching you. So tell us where you're from. Just put a little shout out and tell us where you're from. It's great to see you. Great to know that you're here. And I'm really excited. We have a return guest today. Dr. Maya Shetreat is with us. And hello, Dr. Shetreat. Nice to see you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. You can call me Dr. Maya. We'll be on a first name basis.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you so much for that. Okay. And just to get it right, I'm going to just give you a little comprehensive background on Dr. Maya. If I can find my glasses. Yep, here we go. Maya Shetreat, MD, is a neurologist, an herbalist, urban farmer, and author of The Dirt Cure, which has been translated into 10 languages. Oh, you dog. Mine's only in 8. So I bow to you. I bow to you. She's been featured in the New York Times, The Telegraph, NPR, Sky News, The Dr. Oz Show, and many, many more. Dr. Maya is the founder of the Terrain Institute, where she teaches earth-based programs for transformational healing, including professional training programs for psychedelic-assisted approaches. She works and studies with indigenous communities and healers from around the world, and is a lifelong student of ethnobotany, plant healing, and the sacred. And for most of us, I think that sounds a little weird, but as you start to understand what all of that means, you say, wow, this gal is right on target. She is bringing information that only the wise ones who know how to live healthy on the planet are implementing, and she's bringing it to all of us. So thank you so much, Dr. Maya, for being with us today.
Well, thank you for your kind words.
Again, yes. Somebody says, where's the baby boy? And he'll be here soon. His bedtime's coming, so Marzi will bring him in before that. It's always fun to bring him into Facebook Live so he can Google to everyone and say hello in his own way. So, Dr. Maya, as a neurologist, is there, now I know an answer to this, but is there reality on herbs being helpful in getting our brain to function more the way it's supposed to at optimum potential?
Yeah, so the way that plants work is first of all, just let's start with the idea that plants are actually as complex as we are. They've evolved with us. They're older than we are in many ways. They've been around longer. And so when we talk about the medicine of plants, any number of kinds of plants, we're talking about not just one compound like we would with a pharmaceutical or even a supplement, but it's actually thousands of compounds in a whole plant that might be.
Oh, wait. Excuse me. Is that a little bit of an exaggeration, or are there really thousands of compounds in a plant?
There are really thousands of compounds in a plant.
I know that, but I'm hearing the brains of people out there, right? And they're saying, "Oh, come on, not no, really." I'm going to give you a simple example, and then we'll continue, please. Kids in Jamaica do not get cavities. Poor children in Jamaica do not get cavities. They're chewing on sugar cane all day. And they're chewing on sugar cane all day, and it's really sweet, but they don't get cavities. Why? Because they've got the whole plant, the whole sugar cane, with all of its enzymes and its protective nutrients, not just the white crystalline powder that our manufacturing companies extract out of that sugar cane, and we call it sugar. The technical name sucrose, which gives cavities and many more problems that we all know about. Don't eat so much sugar. But the sugar cane that these kids chew It's because there are so many different compounds that they're getting into their mouth and their oral microbiome. So I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but I thought that was for people who were saying, "Not, yeah, wait a minute, really?" So please continue.
Well, and to that point, and then I'll get back to what I was saying, blackstrap molasses is actually the leftover refuse from making, crystalline sugar, as you're talking about, the kind what we think of when we think of sugar. So this mucky, dark, sticky substance has an incredibly high ORAC, other compounds in it, and it's used for like everything under the sun, but it's an incredible remedy for constipation, actually. And yeah, like it can be foolproof for people who
Yes.
have really difficult constipation issues. So it's just interesting because we think of sugar as being so bad, but the blackstrap molasses from the whole plant, right, is like all the muck is actually where a lot of the gifts of the plant are. So
You're
yeah.
absolutely, and I've used blackstrap molasses for years because it's high in iron.
Mhm.
So for vegetarians who won't eat meat, a little bit of blackstrap molasses daily is going to give them that extra source of iron.
Yeah, it's wonderful for that. And non-constipating, which is also
Right,
wonderful.
right.
Um, yeah, so the way that, and in Chinese medicine, as an example, there are ways that they look at these plants and they say, okay, this compound or this particular plant is like the general. So it's like what we would think of as the strongest compound that's doing what you might want, right, of the plant. And someone might take that and just use that and make that into pharmaceutical, and then that's going to be like this potent medicine. But actually, in the plant, there's also weaker and milder compounds that get stronger, 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 stronger. And all of these are some of the thousands of compounds. And then there are some compounds that work against that compound. And it's all considered to be part of the chemistry of that plant. For example, I'll give you an example, like willow bark or meadowsweet, both actually, they are what aspirin was derived from. So this, like, white willow bark has the salicylic acid, which is what became aspirin. One of the biggest side effects of aspirin is ulcers, right? Negative side effects is that you can develop real stomach irritation and gastric irritation and ulcers. But white willow bark actually is a remedy for ulcers because it's the whole remedy, right? It's all of these compounds that are working together and against each other in this symphony that is healing to our whole body.
So just like sugar, sucrose is the white crystalline powder of sugar cane, and it's got hundreds of other compounds in it. White willow, aspirin is the white crystalline
Mhm.
acid from white willow, but white willow has hundreds of other compounds in it that keep the balance so that it doesn't knock us out. That's a great example because everyone knows about aspirin and we think it's harmless and it's not. There are studies that show one aspirin, just one aspirin, and you alter your microbiome for a few months. It
Mhm.
takes that long to get your microbiome back to where it was from just one aspirin. So if you need aspirin, you take it. But if you can do something that's going to have similar benefits or more without the potential complication, that's always better, which is kind of the way I lean in thinking about herbs, is that you're going to get the results you want without the likely complications that the pharmaceuticals often will have with them. Is that a rational way of thinking about this?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just so important to remember that there's a whole industry that makes a lot of money off of kind of demonizing or delegitimizing botanical medicine, even though that botanical medicine has been around, I mean, actually for thousands of years, right? That's what we had from the beginning of time. And it's kept us going pretty well. And as an herbalist, and a medical doctor, I've been able to kind of compare, and I could tell you stories of where the botanical medicines actually were more effective than anything else that was used. I have, just really briefly, like there was a little girl who had a very severe case of pneumonia that one of my friends was dealing with, and she could nothing they were doing. She was in the ICU, intubated. Nothing they were doing was helping. She was dying. She was literally dying. And this friend of mine actually called at the time our herbal teacher, who was also an MD and an herbalist, and said, you know, she basically emailed her and said, I'm sending my guardian angels out to like help us. And, you know, because she just was like, she said, this child is at death's door. And she got an email back within, you know, an hour. And it said, use olive leaf. And she went and got olive leaf, talked to the PICU doctor, and they said, okay, let's do it. And gave it to her through her NG tube, and she recovered. She totally recovered, and nothing else had done anything.
Marvelous, marvelous. And for those that don't understand how that could happen, just know that there are thousands of case studies like that in the literature. Because we don't understand it doesn't mean it can't happen, right? And as we get more understanding, we open up to more possibilities. We've got some questions that have come in, Dr. Maya. The first one is from Shanquilo. She said, hi, Dr. Maya. On a previous summit, you said you've seen conditions appear after huge weight loss. Do you have any advice on how to avoid this?
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, I have had people come present to me after after having really significant weight loss experiences, things like Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or things like that over the years, where they then presented with the onset of like an autoimmune condition. And I don't know, Dr. Tom, if you've seen similar presentations, but what I perceived in that process is that, you know, very often people don't realize that your adipose cells, your fat cells, are actually protective in a certain way. They can cause a lot of problems, and they do cause a lot of problems for many people, but at the same time, they sequester toxins. And so that can actually be one reason it's very difficult for people to lose weight, among others, is that your adipose tissue is like, no, we can't release what's in here. We're sequestering it so it doesn't go back into the systemic circulation and toxify this person. Right. So what I would say about weight loss is you really want to make sure, for me, like I would say, using a lot of gentle detoxification. You know, and we could go through what those are if you want to, but, you know, I would say even things like hot, cold showers or dry brushing, saunas, infrared light, gentle exercise. Doesn't even have to be super vigorous, but sweating is really important. Earthing is really important. Vagal nerve stimulation, different kinds of practices, humming and meditation. All of these things, plus things you're ingesting, which could be botanical, like I was going to mention before, dandelion, Dr. Tom, and say that, you know, we think of dandelion as this thing we want to get rid of in our lawns, except me, of course. You can come see my lawn in the middle of the spring. People will probably hate me in my neighborhood. But if you look at the literature on dandelion, and I'm not going to even scratch the surface, it's an incredible detoxifier. It's beautiful for the liver because it has these bitter compounds that really support you on a cellular level, but also especially in the liver and the gut, in the gallbladder, so you can just usher out the toxins from your body. But by the way, dandelion has papers in the scientific literature, extensive papers on being protective and killing almost every kind of cancer. I mean, pancreatic cancer, I mean, colon cancer, I mean, breast cancer, lung cancer. I mean, you name it. Dandelion is this incredibly potent medicine, and we like have no idea. We just think it's, in terms of the weight loss piece, you really, really want to go in knowing that you need to support the process. And I mean, we scratch the surface here, but not really, you know, it's a real important piece.
You know, your story on dandelion reminded me, I lived in Chicago for 25 years and had a practice there and raised our kids there. And when we bought our home, I asked the seller of the home, how do you take care of your lawn? And we've ever since the day we moved in, we built this house. I've been doing the same thing. And he told me what he was using and for his fertilizer and his weed killer. And so I wrote it all down. Then I did all the research to see how long does that weed killer last in the soil. And it was 4 years, up to 4 years. And so I waited 7 years. Then I started harvesting the dandelions that grow in our grass in the spring, and I'd put them in our salads because it's bitter. And when you start reading about bitter greens or watercress, things that have a little bit of a bitter taste to them, they're very detoxifying and helpful. The second point I want to make is that I believe we all need to have detoxification as a component of our everyday lives and awareness around detoxification. I never used to think like that, but as I've been reading the science in the last few years of how many chemicals we're exposed to now that never in history have people been exposed to, and it's our fat cells that store a lot of these chemicals when they get in our body, that we really have to focus on detoxification. And so I don't have the time with a person to do justice on how to detox and feel comfortable that you're doing it well. So I talk about some basic things like water, but I ask everyone, please read the Godfather's book, Dr. Joe Pizzorno, on the toxin solution. It's an excellent, excellent book. And he talks, and he's been on the show twice here now, and he talks about how do you prepare your body before you start detoxing? How do you help those elimination systems work? So for everyone out there, please consider that before you start an aggressive weight loss program, because when you lose weight, you want to lose fat more than muscle. And that's the goal. And fat is where we store a lot of these toxic chemicals. So it's going to happen as you're successful in reducing your weight, that you're flushing a lot of this stuff into your system. So you have to have adequate detox pathways to escort this stuff out so it doesn't get closer to your brain or other tissues. Really important to keep that in mind. Next question comes from, where did it go? Hang on a minute. My homework just popped up of what I was working on earlier, so that's not where it is. It was on, I'm going to have to bring up the thing again. It was on a mushroom, and here it is. Let's see now. Okay. Dr. Maya, okay, well, no, here's the mushroom question from Philip. I have a unique experience, quote, odyssey, from ingesting one lemon-sized A. muscaria. Is there any research on this enigmatic mushroom?
So I think what he's referring to is one of the psychedelic Amanita mushrooms.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Amanita muscaria.
That's right. So, that's interesting because most people who engage with psychedelic mushrooms these days are engaging with mushrooms of the Psilocybin variety, which are, well, more common, and there are many, more varieties. There is research on the Amanita mushroom, which is psychedelic. And in fact, one of the particular strains of that mushroom is actually what originally was used by Siberian shamans as a way to, so what people may not know about psychedelic medicines is that indigenous communities worked with these medicines communally very often. So it wasn't like something you just did necessarily on your own for fun or even for healing. It was something that you did with a guide, right, who was considered to be the community healer, a shaman they might have been called, or in Siberia, that is actually where the original shamans were. That's where the word kind of came from. And this would be part of the healing of the community, to have this collective experience. And actually, This is a little extra controversial, but they would consume it. The shaman would consume it and collect his urine, and then the community would drink some of the urine because it was actually a way of protecting them from a particular toxin that could be incredibly liver damaging in that mushroom. So that is like where you really want to beware, is making sure, and this is of course with any mushroom that you know encounter, but the Amanita mushrooms. So there are Amanita strains that are non-psychedelic but very poisonous. And then there's this one that does have some liver toxicity, but also psychedelic properties. And the psychedelic properties, you know, and we can go into this, Dr. Tom, as much as you desire. I'll kind of let you take the lead, but that actually has very profound research in terms of what it can do for severe disorders like treatment-resistant depression, OCD, PTSD, sexual trauma, eating disorders. Even now it's being looked at, not this particular mushroom, but with psilocybin microdoses that are not even psychedelic in the experience, right? Actually being looked at for dementia. And there are studies currently going on right now looking at stopping and reversing dementia using microdoses of psilocybin mushrooms and lion's mane mycelium and niacin. Those three, it's called STACK, put together. Actually, it's being studied in academic center in California.
Yeah, we've been involved at UCSD with a team that's working on that and has been for about, well, we've been working with them for about 5 years now. And microdosing of hallucinogens, not enough to cause what we've commonly heard of LSD trips and things like that, but rather just enough to bring some balance to how this brain is looking out at the world. And the impact has been tremendous, just tremendous. People have their lives back. Schizophrenia, as you say, OCD, major depressive disorder. Major depressive disorder means, the definition is you're on 2 medications for depression and you still can't function. You can't hold a job. That's major depressive disorder. And those severe cases are getting dramatic relief by microdosing hallucinogens. So the concept is very valid, lots of good science behind it, lots of research being done. It's so difficult because we all have a bias on the concept and we don't want to hear it as the general public. So these researchers are just publishing their papers and keeping really quiet about it and not going out and trying to shout on the rooftops of how great this is at symposiums on major depressive disorder, things like that. The really scientific conferences, they'll present their paper, but they, you know, I'm reminded, this is a good example of why more people haven't heard about this, that in my world of gluten sensitivity, there was a study done where confocal microscopy is where you put a tube down into the intestines with a camera, and you can see, almost like electron microscopic, the cells of the inside lining of the gut. And they were looking to see how the lining of the gut responds to different foods. And they found that every single person who was exposed to wheat got leaky gut within 5 minutes. And I won't go through how they did it, but they saw that, every single person. And the way they wrote it in the paper was, the response was obvious to all in the room. That's their way of saying, holy cow, Batman, look at this. You know, right? That's right. They're like, boom, boom. The response was visible to everyone in the room. And so that's the world of microdosing of psychedelics, that nobody wants to stand on stage and say, wake up, everyone. This stuff really works for people that need help. It really works. They just don't want to take that kind of a stand because of the public perception about psychedelics. So thank you for sharing that. That was A great answer to Philip's question of his unique odyssey that he
Well,
experienced.
and I will say this. I mean, if you search up articles on the front page of the New York Times, there are people shouting it from the rooftops about, the benefits of psychedelics these days because, there is actually a tremendous amount of media. It's just maybe not reached its tipping point yet, but
Mhm.
I think, the press is definitely getting wind of something that they think is pretty exciting.
Yeah, hopefully sooner than later,
Yeah,
hopefully so that more people can be helped who really need the help.
absolutely.
Jane's on Zoom, and she's a remedy for pain and inflammation in the top of arms and shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say this. First of all, you want to be thinking about why you're having pain and inflammation. So, the first things first are just, understanding that when you're in like a chronic pain situation, uh, what can be going on. And of course, I don't know about your physical activity and if it was an injury or if it, what else is going on. But anything that's kind of a lasting kind of pain, it's likely that you're in what we would call cell danger mode, where this the way that your body is operating is in kind of a high alert situation, and it's having a hard time getting out of that. So whenever you're in cell danger, you want to be looking at the things that people like me and like Dr. Tom are talking about all the time. You want to be looking obviously at your diet, what's happening with your diet. You want to be thinking about your microbiome and the health of your gut lining because that can actually and I can not even count over the course of my career how many people came to me with any kind of chronic pain, whether it be migraines or cluster headaches or injuries of various kinds or just like pain in their hands and joints that we change their diet and do healing of the gut and the pain totally disappears. Assuming that you've been looking, internally at these things already. Um, there are several different things. Just from an inflammatory standpoint, I love using curcumin as a way of just settling down significant inflammation. So you can work with turmeric, and what I think is so interesting is the data actually shows, because we talk about the fact that turmeric or even curcumin um, doesn't actually leave the gut and enter the systemic circulation very easily. So we think, oh, it's not going to be that helpful for inflammation or like pain. But actually, it turns out that it's in really close and intimate relationship with your microbiome. It changes the microbiome in ways that then the microbiome makeup can make that curcumin more bioavailable so that it actually can do the work that it needs to do. Not to mention that the microbiome change also changes the way you feel because your microbiome is talking to your mitochondria all the time. So I went on a little nerd detour there because I can't stop myself from doing that now and then.
It's critically important.
Critically
important.
yeah,
Yes.
but something I love just for that kind of pain as well is to use a salve, like a comfrey salve. So you can get like a really great herbal muscle rub. And it should contain something like comfrey, and it could also contain St. John's wort, which is also excellent. Both of those are excellent for muscle pain, excellent for pain in general. Another thing could be Solomon seal oil if it's more joint related. And rubbing that on and putting something warm over it. I also love castor oil packs. I think they're wonderful for chronic pain. Again, using like a flannel of some kind. You just need to wear old clothes or no clothes if you're doing that much, no clothes on top. Cover it. You put your flannel in a jar. You literally pour castor oil in just so that it's a little soaked, but not like covered in like not like a glass of water. Squeeze it out over the jar, put it over the area of pain, and then I use an old towel that I just know that's all I'm going to use it for because castor oil stains and it smells. And then I will use a heating pad. Some people will use, and if you have an infrared, that's even nicer. But basically, some people will use a hot pack, And basically, you sit and put that on for half an hour, and do it pretty regularly. You will find that that will be incredibly beneficial for pain. So, oh, we have a
Yep.
visitor.
We have a visitor. Yep, we have a visitor. Set so that he can see. And let me make a little room here. There we go. There we go. There he is.
Oh my gosh.
That's Dr. Maya. Say hi, Dr. Maya. Hi. Yeah. Gio has 102 fever today, and it's been fluctuating a little bit. We've been working with him, and you can see he's not suffering. He's happy as can be. And it's as my wife is kind of giggling. Yeah, he's real happy. But okay, he's done. Okay, bye-bye. So thanks for accommodating that. Yeah, he just loves to see everybody. And on the topic of castor oil, there is a remarkable book called Oil That Heals. It's the country doctor, 50 years in practice, and he talks about all the different ways he's used castor oil packs. So it's a great little read. It's on Amazon, small book, probably a couple hours to read it. And once you've read it, you go, really? Wow, really? You know, and again and again and again. And it's a harmless protocol. You'll never hurt yourself with a castor oil pack. And so it's a family remedy that we've used many times. If Gio's, it's one of the more big guns I'll use with Gio if need be. I've never had to use it yet. This is the third time he's had a fever in 14 months. You know, so his body fights something, and that's good. I'm happy. He's got 102, great, and he's happy. He's not suffering. Good. He'll be fine tomorrow. But it's working his immune system, right? So that's a good thing to be doing, is to allow your child to have a fever like that. You just monitor it. If it goes above 103 to 103.5, now it's time for some intervention in my book. If it stays up there, you know, if it peaks up and then comes back down within an hour, okay, fine. He's doing fine. In any event, The Oil That Heals is a great read, and you'll feel very comfortable about using castor oil packs for you and your family. Let's see, we got 5 Instagram questions, went boom, 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 boom. So what part of the dandelions do you eat? Just the greens. And for me, it's been just the greens, but Dr. Maya may know more about that. Dr. Maya?
Yeah, so if you come look on my website, I have a blog about how to make dandelion fritters. And the way that I've made it is actually using quinoa flour. You could use really any kind of flour though. And I don't even use eggs. I just use like a little flour and water, but you can use eggs and you use the blossoms. So this is like, my family gets so excited about this because we like pound them. They're so delicious. And you know, when you look, one of the things that I teach about in my programs is how plants have signatures that show us what their beneficial properties can be. So when you see the yellow, that bright, deep yellow of dandelion, you know that it's probably very, very good for what? What's yellow in our bodies is urine. So it is a very, very gentle but powerful at the same time, effective diuretic. And it's also, meaning it helps you excrete, you know, fluids from the body. And it's also very stimulating to the gallbladder and liver, which helps you detoxify, as we spoke about earlier, binding toxins and ushering them out of the body. But it's very supportive for digestion, digesting fats, so you get all the benefits and the vitamins of the fats for your brain and your immune system, your hormones, and so on. So yes, you can eat every part of the dandelion. So I drink roasted dandelion root tea, and you can buy that organic. You want to always make sure that you're getting organic if you're purchasing it, because as we know, people really like to poison dandelions and lawns and, you know, all of that. But if you know that your lawn is relatively good in that department, you know, I go and I have hundreds and hundreds of dandelions. I actually have to hold myself back to not harvest all of them because I want more dandelions next year, you know? So the roots, though, you can just buy the tea in tea bags, and it tastes almost like coffee, only it's incredibly detoxifying, and as we discussed before, cancer preventative. So that's really nice and is very, very healthy and healing for the microbiome of the gut. So a lot of benefits. I'm not, like I said, not getting into all of them because you want to know about how to consume them. So the leaves, as Dr. Tom said, you can saute them. You can, if you really don't like that intense bitter, you can mix it with other kinds of greens to kind of like modulate it a little bit, especially for like little kids who have very potent bitter receptors in their mouth still. The blossom, you can also make actually a dandelion wine. I don't have that recipe on my website though, not yet anyway. And then the root, you know, so all of the dandelion is incredibly beneficial.
That's a really comprehensive, great answer. You know, you reminded me that when I was in my early 20s, I worked in a health food restaurant, and every spring we would have zucchini flowers, and we'd make tempura with them. You know, you dip them in a batter and then put them in the fryer, and everything in the restaurant was gluten free, and but they were delicious. And now I understand what you mean about the flowers, and your family just loves them. I can understand why. Is there too much iron in dandelions and eating greens in general?
So, you know, I think that first of all, it depends on who you are. So there's a lot of conversation about who needs iron, who doesn't need iron, and so on. And so we know, at least for a fact, that in growing children and in pregnant and also just menstruating women, um, through the course of that period of life, it's very important to get a significant amount of iron, number one. The question about men is, you know, probably they don't need to get nearly as much iron as women of childbearing age and children. And probably postmenopausal, we don't need quite as much iron. That said, I tend to trust getting iron from plant sources because although they are rich in iron, I don't think they are iron, and they're coming, keep in mind, with this whole array of other compounds that actually help mitigate, you know, how the iron is operating in the body. And I'm curious, Dr. Tom, if you have a similar opinion or a different opinion about greens and iron. I just haven't ever seen, I've seen problems with certain kinds of greens, mostly cruciferous, that they can be high in thallium, which can be problematic. I haven't ever seen people personally, but I don't treat men as much as I treat children and women, you know, over the course of my work. I've never really seen someone who ate a lot of greens be toxic or even really high in iron. I see more people who are, you know, borderline, and especially looking at their ferritin, borderline ferritin levels, rather than high iron or high ferritin levels.
Right, borderline low, right. And yeah, I'm in full agreement. And if someone's vegetarian and they're trying to get iron and they're eating a number of different iron foods, I'll always suggest, well, let's get our first blood test looking at your iron markers, not just iron levels, but your iron markers, including the storage level, ferritin. Let's see where you are to start with right now with how you lived your life up to this point. And from there, then we take action. And I've never heard of a problem with eating greens and too much iron. It certainly is possible, I guess, but I've never seen that be a problem. We have a question from New Zealand that came in on Zoom, and it's 1:30 there in the afternoon on Wednesday. Thank you. I'll do my best to remember that. It said, my audio is not so great in New Zealand, but it's 1:30 in the afternoon. I will check out the recording. I've put my Hashimoto's into remission through diet and lifestyle. My dear teen daughter died 2 years ago suddenly. The antidepressants were poison. I started microdosing with mushrooms to excellent effect. In New Zealand, we have very pure psilocybin mushrooms here in spring and fall. How do I best dry them? Must I use a dehydrator or can I dry them in a dark, warm area? We have wild comfrey all over also.
Well, first of all, I just want to extend my
Yes,
sympathy, my really deep condolences um, because of what happened to your daughter. And I'm really sorry to hear that she had a very hard time with the antidepressants. And I would say that is not uncommon, unfortunately. Um, that's part of the reason why I feel really committed to sharing the science about uh, medicines like psilocybin mushrooms and other psychedelics because of how promising they are. Um, and in fact, they've been um, they've been looked at in particular for safety, right? That's one of the biggest questions: is are they safe? And in fact, especially for psilocybin mushrooms, and these studies are done by governments. So there are very large scale studies looking at people who happen to have taken psilocybin mushrooms and not necessarily mixing with other kinds of alcohol or other kinds of substances. And they found that they were extremely safe, did not increase risk of things like suicide or other kinds of problems, and people did actually well as compared to certain other kinds of substances or no substances. So people tend to do very well and are very safe. Now, I'm not saying that's across the board here because you need to, we talk a lot about set and setting when we talk about working with these kinds of medicines, especially in a macro dose, not micro dose like we were talking about before, that it's really important to be in the right setting and be, safe and all of that. That said, about the psilocybin itself, um, the answer is ideally, because the benefits of these mushrooms can break down quite quickly. You do want to dehydrate them if you want to preserve them. If you are, I don't know about legality in New Zealand, so I'll let you figure that part out. Because in fact, psilocybin, which the magic mushrooms are in many places being decriminalized, but in many places they're still not legal, and that's an important thing to say. But that said, yes, dehydrating them is ideal, much, much better than just letting them dry somewhere. That could you could run into mold problems, and that is the last thing that you want. Another thing that some people do if they don't have a dehydrator is they can use those little packets that absorb moisture. Put it in like a plastic bag and put the mushrooms there and the packet, and it'll absorb all of the moisture. So that's another option that people use. And yay on the comfrey. Comfrey is a wonderful, wonderful medicine. I used it when I broke a bone once. The one time I broke a bone, and people were amazed. The doctors were amazed at how quickly my X-rays improved, and so I love, love,
marvelous,
love.
marvelous. Sharon just commented on Instagram. She said, "Did I understand wrong? And it was the mother, not the father. Was the mother taking the mushrooms for depression after the death of her daughter?" And the answer is yes. And it was that the daughter died suddenly, and the mom was taking the antidepressants, but they were poison to her. She felt like they were just poison, so she started microdosing in place of the antidepressants. That's how I understand the question also. The answer was really excellent, though. Thank you, Dr. Maya, for that. Philip has a question on Facebook. Hi, Dr. Shetreat. What is the difference, or how can we distinguish between 1, allergic reaction, 2, a detox flush, 3, enzyme activity, 4, toxins or candidiasis from fungal infection, that all this causes extreme urticaria?
Mm. Wow, this is a big question. And it's a little, so I'm thinking, okay, number one is an allergic reaction. I will just say, I think before, it would help me if I could actually see the list because I'm not sure I can hold it all in my head at the
Sure.
same time. But that said, I will say to you, sometimes it can be really difficult to know if something is an allergic reaction versus a Herxheimer reaction versus, you know, any other kind of like, even having a reaction to the, like a sensitivity or another kind of reaction to something you're taking to help with whatever the process is. So I can't say, you know, we do have, you know, kind of guideposts to let us know, like if I see someone and their lips are a little swollen or they're feeling something in their tongue or, you know, they're like, you know, things like that, or they're breaking out in hives or they have kind of welts of some kind, I'm going to be concerned they're having an allergic reaction. And I'm going to react as if they're having an allergic reaction because my number one goal is to make sure people don't die, right? I mean, that's all of our number one goal is we don't want to sit and get like intellectual and cerebral if somebody's like getting swelling of their mouth or throat or breaking out in hives, which are the classic allergic reaction. But I'm sure, Dr. Tom, you have seen, and I know I have seen, people have allergic reactions that look very different from the classic allergic reaction that you're supposed to have in the amount of time, which is usually what we were taught, right, is immediate. But you can see allergic reactions really play out differently. They can be vomiting, they can be diarrhea, they can be, I've seen people have seizures that have seizures already usually. It's not necessarily like just out of nowhere, you know. But there are a lot of ways that you can see that histamine response play out that doesn't look like your classic allergic reaction. Herxheimer reactions, you know, I've seen them look all kinds of ways. And, you know, usually I will not see hives with a Herxheimer reaction, although you can. But you'll see a lot of discomfort in a lot of other ways. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I can't remember the other two. I remember something
Sure,
about
of course. One was enzyme activity and the other is toxins or candidiasis from fungal infections.
So, you know, one of the things that I would just say about it is sometimes the way that we learn what's the cause is by, you know, addressing the symptoms and supporting the person and learning what is the most effective at helping them. So, you know, I would say off the top of my head, if I see someone who I'm not sure if they're, you know, having a Herxheimer or they're having kind of a toxic release of something, one thing I might do no matter what is give them a binder, right? Or a set of binders like activated charcoal or other things that will actually just help to sop up and soak up and bind and excrete whatever it is that's going on. And I would do that in any of the above situations. A lot of the things that, you know, at least I would do would tend to address any of those situations by assisting the body in doing what it knows to do, but just promoting that process. Again, going to things like sauna and red light, not if I think it's an acute allergic reaction, right? I might do those things and I want to get them into a parasympathetic mode, all of those kinds of things. But if it's an allergic reaction, a true allergic reaction, I'm definitely going to be thinking about things like if, you know, Benadryl, or I will use things like stinging nettles, which is incredibly effective. Not if I think it's anaphylaxis, but in other cases, I do acupressure, I do other things, because obviously, again, you want to make sure nothing extreme happens.
Thank you. Very comprehensive answer. Maggie asks, so are you saying eat the dandelion flowers or the leaves? And all of it is what we're saying, Maggie. It's completely edible as long as you're sure it's organic. You know, so that's the one thing you have to be careful of, is that somebody didn't pick dandelions on the neighbor's lawn and just eat those, because you're getting a lot of the pesticides and insecticides. Maggie then asked the question on Instagram, do roots need to be cooked? And you know, I'll start the answer with some roots. Of course, you can if you want to, but my son is chewing on a carrot all afternoon, a big fat carrot, and that's the root of the plant, right? And radishes, you've seen shaved radishes raw in salads. So it depends. And some roots you would want to cook. I don't know about eating raw white potatoes. I don't know if that's a good idea, but Dr. Maya, what else would you say to the question? Do roots need to be cooked?
So I'll say a couple things. In terms of foods, the way that I think about roots is usually, we have a sense of what needs to be cooked when it comes to roots. Like most people are not longing to eat a raw white potato, for instance.
Right.
And I would say, one of the issues with any number of roots is that they do tend to be high in oxalates, um, as a general rule, which can cause inflammation, can cause pain, can cause urinary frequency, can cause things like vulvodynia, which can, cause painful sex and other things like that. So if you may have an oxalate issue or chronic pain condition, things like that, you may want to cook your root vegetables. Boiling them actually reduces oxalates as long as you dispose of the water, meaning you don't include that in, whatever it is that you're making. Um, that is a way to reduce oxalate load. Um, Assuming you don't need to just kind of take a break from, most oxalates. When it comes to things like roots for plants, like herbally, the way that we will often use roots will be a decoction. And a decoction is when, you chop up the root. So let's say I'm using a dandelion root as an example. You clean it, okay? You want to clean it first because it's coated in, soil and so on and so forth. You still are going to get the microbes, the nice traces of microbes that are there. And I consider a little trace of dirt to be fine too. It's like a nutrient, but then you chop it up and you put it in water and you actually will boil it, bring it to a boil and then even simmer it for a long period of time. Think about ginger, right? Like if you make ginger tea, and I think I have a recipe for this also on my website, you cut up the ginger. And if it's organic, you don't necessarily need to peel it. And what I do is bring it to a boil and then simmer it. So boil it for maybe 10 minutes, simmer it for longer, and you'll get this spicy, delicious tea. You can add a little bit of raw honey to it if you absolutely need to, and you like that little tinge. And it's incredible, actually, for coughs, for colds. It's great for your gut microbiome. It's great for inflammation and pain. I drink ginger tea all winter long. I love it. So that's like an example. Dandelion tea would be another where you're using the roots. So yes is the answer. You do want to cook it generally.
Yes. Yes. Great. Let's see. Um, there was a really interesting question that caught my attention. Do you think flavored instant coffee from a jar could be toxic?
Well, I feel like you have an opinion here, Tom. Am I right?
Well, it's a really good example of levels of knowledge that the general public has or does not have.
Mm.
That when you start to the chemicals that are used as the flavorings, and if you just Google the chemical, and you're going to see all this geeky stuff, but look at side effects of that chemical used for flavorings. And then you see, what? Wow, what? And then there's like 3 or 4 or 5 different compounds used in flavoring instant coffee. And then you also look at how do they make this instant coffee? What kind of chemicals do they use on the beans? And when you do that type of research, and it's hard for people who have never looked into things like that before, but you start to find all of this startling information. Well, this is a poison, so the answer is yes, it is a toxic compound. And once again, I would fall back to Dr. Pizzorno's book, The Toxin Solution. Dr. Joe Pizzorno, incredibly well written, and he's the godfather in the world of detoxifying. And you will get such jaw-dropping information and easy guidance on how to start. And he actually treats us all like beginners, making sure that we understand the basics before we move to the next step or the next level of detoxifying, and then the next level. So, make sure you got this one first before you go to this. Dr. Maya, anything you would like to add to that?
I think you covered it really nicely. The one thing I would say is that coffee, which most of us don't think of as a plant tonic, is actually considered to be, right? Coffee is a plant, and we are enslaved, in a sense, many people, to coffee. And it's actually a very potent medicine and falls under what we would call a master plant, an indigenous kind of terminology to say that it has a real ability to alter the way that we feel and our health in very profound ways. And so to me, having instant coffee that's flavored is sort of like it sort of goes to the idea of like we love to poison dandelions. Like this doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I do understand wanting things to be quick and easy, but the other option is you get like the full benefit of this incredible bitter plant tonic that actually has very potent effects, as we discussed, on the bitter receptors in our body, which are not just in our mouth. No. You might think you only have bitter receptors in your mouth. You have bitter receptors in your esophagus, throughout your whole entire digestive tract, your liver, your gallbladder, as we discussed, your breasts, testicles, lungs, brain, all have bitter receptors. Why? Because bitters are associated with poison. And it actually is part of why bitters are so effective for us is they instigate in small amounts in plant, tonics like this, they instigate our cells and our mitochondria to step up and actually become more optimally functioning. So it makes us healthier simply by this little kind of mini pseudo poison, right? This alkaloid, this bitter alkaloid that comes in, let's say, the form of coffee. So it's like so ironic in a sense that we would turn it into this instant flavored brew. And I hate to say it like that because it makes me feel like, I'm like a killjoy.
Judgmental or something. It's just a reality check. You just have to speak your truth on that. And this thing about the bitter, I'm so happy that my son loves persimmons. Mm-hmm. And he'll want to eat, a persimmon. Every morning, he and I go out to make the coffee and I open the refrigerator and I say, what do we have for Geo today? And I say, see, do you want strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, or persimmons? And I'll hold two and he always picks one or the other. And, but now he looks and he points and some days he wants persimmons and they're bitter. I mean, I don't really like persimmons, but I'm happy to see he does because I know the value. Mm-hmm. We have a couple of really important questions I want to make sure we get to because we're over the end of the hour. But the first one from Kim on Facebook. I tapered slowly off an antidepressant that I took for almost 25 years. Congratulations, Kim. I experienced horrible withdrawal symptoms. I'm 36 months off the antidepressant and still experiencing withdrawal symptoms, including anxiety and insomnia. Yeah. Would you consider it safe to microdose at this time off of the antidepressant?
So, first of all, congratulations on doing that process. I know it's really, it can be really challenging. And, I'm going to mention my friend and colleague, Kelly Brogan, Dr. Kelly Brogan, who wrote A Mind of Your Own. And she actually talks about and guides people, I think, through this exact kind of situation. So, and, you may or may not already be familiar with her and her work. To answer your question, the answer is yes. Psilocybin, would I recommend it? I can't recommend it. Okay. I can only talk about it educationally at this time. To finish off this process, it absolutely could be. And I think what would be important is to do it with some guidance, because you want to make sure that there's someone experienced, not because you'd be having any kind of big psychedelic experience, but you want to make sure, especially because I'm not exactly sure I don't know if I missed what number of milligrams you're at this point or how low you've gone, but was it said if she's totally off or?
Off for 36 months.
Oh, off. Okay, great. So I think it could definitely be something that may be helpful for that kind of situation. Absolutely.
I would like to reinforce Dr. Kelly Brogan's book. It's a great book, A Mind of Your Own. And it came out about a year and a half ago. And this will give you confidence and guidance, knowing that you're moving in the right direction and that you're not alone. So please pick up Dr. Brogan's book and consider her recommendations or work with Dr. Maya on her website. And I fully agree. It's best to have some guidance. Kudos to you for your courage and your determination to do this. So kudos to you, and get some guidance from someone who is really expert at this. Before we get to our last question, I want to do a shout out to one of my favorite attendees every week, little Gracie in Iowa. Hi, Gracie. Gracie and her family watch every week. Everything stops on Tuesday night to watch Facebook Live. So thank you so much. And thank you for watching. I think, Gracie, I just know in the back of my mind that this young girl is going to be quite the healer. She already is a healer, has helped her mom a lot, but she's going to help a lot of people in her life because she's attentive and listens and is interested every week. So Gracie, I want to see some questions from you start coming in next week, okay? Okay, last question. So much valuable information. Thank you both. This is from Darina on Zoom. What are the mushrooms with the strongest antiviral and antibacterial medicinal properties, as I am dealing with severe viral lung infection and bacterial pneumonia at the same time? Thank you.
Well, mushrooms are definitely the right place to go when you're in that kind of situation, partly because they both have the antiviral and antibacterial properties directly. They're also interacting with your microbiome. So they're stimulating your immune response, and they directly stimulate your mitochondria and your immune cells. So some of the ones that I would say off the top of my head, and am I allowed to mention that people can go listen to my summit right now, which is live?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
So right now I have a summit going with over 43 speakers, all about different kinds of psychedelics and different ways of thinking about them, working with them. I think it's still live. Day one is still live from yesterday and has all the top researchers in, really some of the top researchers in the world who've been, the ones who got their New York Times articles and so on that published in the journal Nature. But importantly, and relevant to this question, and I saw some other questions about mushrooms as well, medicinal mushrooms. It's also about medicinal mushrooms, and we have an entire day on that topic. Christopher Hobbs, who is a mycologist,
very famous,
numerous books on mushrooms and mycelium, and actually has a brand new book that came out. His interview is still live. If you actually go and sign up, you will still get his interview for free right now. And there's going to be also, if you miss it, there's you can still sign up because there's going to be an encore weekend still free.
So the link is being posted here right now, so that everyone, as we finish up here, you can go register right away. And I don't know about most people, but you aren't going to have time to watch 43 interviews. That's not likely, but you're going to see the topics that each person is talking about, and then you can choose the ones that really resonate for you.
100%.
And that Dr. Maya has put all the time into interviewing 43 different reality check. You aren't going to listen to 43 interviews. Now, you may, because you can listen to them again and you, or the picture of the person. And then the title will say, well, I need to listen to that one. And you'll find such valuable information. And as we started this evening off, talking about how this whole world of medicinal microdosing of psychedelics is very credible science, now you're going to hear from the experts themselves. And that's really quite remarkable. Dr. Maya, we're a bit over. Sorry for that, but thank you so much for being here.
Can I just
And
quickly answer Dorina, like very briefly,
of
because
course,
she asked about the mushrooms, and we went on a little, detour for a moment on the summit. But Dorina, I'm sorry to hear you're going through that, and I would just say I would go to reishi, turkey tail, chaga as my top three, and those have really great evidence for being antiviral, antibacterial. In fact, reishi is being used for things like HIV, hepatitis C virus, Epstein-Barr virus, like things that we think of as very difficult to treat. Reishi actually has a lot of effectiveness. So I hope you get better quickly. And if you find an herbalist to work with, that would be awesome, because there are a lot of herbal medications, as I mentioned, olive leaf, but many others that could probably also help you. So
and Dr. Maya, if she's looking for quality product, quality mushroom product, can she find more information on your website?
Yeah, a blog very soon on exactly that topic, because people do have a hard time finding the best products. But I have some products that I really like. I mean, the Host Defense is excellent. That's like a very well-known brand. There's the Medicinal Mushroom Company that's also very good. And the key is you just want to, there are also herbal companies that make some good mushroom products. You don't just have to get them. Gaia Herbs makes really good mushroom products as well, for example. So there are no shortage of great mushroom products out there.
Great, great,
Yeah, so thanks for asking
great.
that question.
You bet, you bet. Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. We always learn so much when you're here. You're just a wealth of information. And I hope everyone walks away with some new insights, and that everyone registers for her summit. Once again, don't get scared off by 43 interviews. Rather, you'll just sign up, and then you've got the list, and you'll be able to choose the ones that you want to watch. Thank you again, Dr. Maya. Great to see you. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.